Good evening to all of you. Well, we hope you'll enjoy the show. 'Cause I'm already dying. I'm already flying. It seems like I'm flying towards the sun. Yes, I'm already dying. I'm already flying. In my dreams, I'm flying towards the sun.
Friends, we are so excited about today's guest. They were the first band to play at the first Cornerstone Festival in 1984. They have been together as a band for almost 40 years. They have released 16 studio albums, 3 EPs, 5 live albums, a single disc compilation album, and a box set. They have also won 2 Dove Awards. Would you please welcome with me the choir?
Hey,
welcome, guys. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. We're just going to get right into it here, guys. If you guys could just kind of tell me how each of your childhoods were like. Was music in there a lot, or just how was things growing up for you guys?
I don't mind going first real quick here. You know what? My family wasn't musical at all. Didn't grow up in a musical background. And it was when I was in elementary school, my mom I didn't have any interest whatsoever. So my mom bought me a saxophone and got me going in band. And I didn't like it. So she bribed me to play, to practice. So she paid me a nickel a minute to practice my saxophone. So I'd put in like a half hour a day running scales and arpeggios and stuff. But I still didn't like being in band. And one day I was talking in band. This is a couple years down the line. I was talking in band and interrupted the speaker, and he got mad at me. So he, back then they had corporal punishment. And, so I was going to get a paddling. So he took me in his office and said, Dan, I hate to do this because you know what, you're really talented, and I think you can make a difference in this band. But so if you apply yourself, I think a lot of good things will happen. So he gave me the whack. That was the first time I ever remember a compliment in my life. Wow. So it totally impacted me, and I became real interested in band and all that. And so that was Ohio. I think it was like 6th grade, 7th grade, something like that. But then, my mom moved to California. I moved with her, enrolled in high school band, and then just got real interested in it. And I was kind of a band nerd guy. I mostly listened to movie soundtracks and like classical and fusion jazz. And then one day I was at a high school party, and somebody played Drop the Needle on vinyl of a band called the Psychedelic Furs. And the first song I heard, I was spellbound. And I was like, what is this? And they said, it's alternative music. And I'm like, okay. And then that was it. Then I got into alternative music and threw away my Star Wars and vinyl and King Kong movie vinyl, and got into alternative, and it just kind of went from there.
Cool.
Nice. I didn't even know that stuff, Dan.
Yeah.
Good story. Yeah, my dad was a drummer in high school. He went to Adventist High School in the marching band, Southern California, and I just always, I just had the rhythm. I wanted to tap. I was always tapping, with my playing on with little pencils on my desk when I was a little kid. And for 4th grade, my 9th birthday, I think it was, I got a snare drum and sticks in a stand. And my dad taught me his cadences from high school, and then told me how to hold the sticks. And then I just wanted to be a drummer. And kid down the street was playing in a garage band, and I would sit on the sidewalk and his band would be playing, call me, don't be afraid, but you're it's 1969, and one time I'm sitting there and he goes, hey, little dude, come on in. And he took me into the garage and, sat me down on a drum set, I was like 10 or something. And and then my dad gave him $1 a week to give me lessons. And that's it. Yeah. I just always, and then from then on, I was always in a band with my friends, and I wanted to be the guy that write the words. I was already sort of like a little weird little poet kid, I was already in touch with my, I guess, feminine qualities or whatever. And I wanted to be write songs and play the drums and write the words, So I'm like one of the only guys I know in life that just kind of has set out my whole life and done what I kind of wanted to do since I was 10 years old.
Great. How about you, Derri?
Well, my mother's side of the family was all musical. My mother could play. It was all very Southern gospel, honky tonk kind of thing. My mom, she could play piano or guitar and some other stuff, banjo, a little bit of banjo. And my uncles were, one of my uncles was a big band director. He had a band in the early 50s through about the early 60s on the West Coast. And then my other uncle, his brother, played guitar. And then all my cousins on that side of the family ended up being musicians for a while. So it was kind of that side of the family. And the first memory that I have of actually being alive, I woke up and I was laying on a blanket under a piano at one of those all-night gospel sings, and my mom was playing the piano. And that's really the first moment I really looked around and remember anything about being alive. And I was propped up in church, at 4 or 5 years old to sing a song and all that kind of stuff. So it just, I had piano lessons, and my mom taught me some chords on guitar, and I always hated to practice. And I was just more interested in just playing than practicing, which, for all you kids out there, practice, please. But yeah, so that my side, they were just, but my mom's side was just musical, and I grew up with it. There were guitars in my house, piano, everything. So, and being a preacher's kid, that's one good thing about Pentecostal, growing up Pentecostals, anybody's allowed to do anything at any time that they want to do. So, you want to get up and, sing, you can sing. You want to play drums, you can play drums. You want to, play guitar, fine. So that was kind of my early life growing up.
Is your faith so right? Are you so blessed? Everybody wonders in the forest. Is your heart so true?
Okay.
As a follow-up to that question, I'd like to ask each of you then how you grew up in relation to faith, how that influenced you, and how it affected you personally.
Myself, I didn't grow up in the church whatsoever. It wasn't until I think it was a senior in high school, close to the end of my senior year. I didn't know, anything about it, but he invited me to Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, to go to church, and it was Saturday night, and so they had concerts at that point, and Res Band was playing, and so they did an altar call. I felt very impacted by that, and I came up, and then began my faith journey at that point. As far as like music wrapped around it, is with the church. I was playing in a top 40 band that played a club in Los Angeles all the time. So I just kind of continued doing that. But I was also playing in Calvary Chapel's worship, not band, but it was like a worship orchestra, so it was kind of, like hymns, just instrumental stuff. And I was doing that. And through that is kind of how I got to be in the choir, because I posted a little thing on a bulletin board saying saxophone player looking for to play with a rock band. And some friend of Derri's found it and gave it to him. And that's how I ended up in the choir.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I grew up in a very conservative Baptist evangelical family. And so my first, like Derri, I was in churches playing. That was where I played. I always had a little band and got to perform on Sunday nights. My drums were in the church, so I started to play. And so that's where I started. And when I met Derri in my early 20s, or I guess we were 20 or something, we got in a band. That's naturally what we did. We were in that world, Maranatha music and all that. We were part of that scene. And so that's how we started out writing Christian songs, writing songs about our faith or the Lord or whatever. But I will say that it was quite quickly in the process, probably about our second or third album, that one thing is when you write lyrics, you spend a lot of time alone, with yourself, with your thoughts, and it's introspective. It causes you to really be introspective, or at least for me anyway. And the more honestly I looked at myself and spent time alone, the more disingenuous it felt to be writing just Christian songs and whatever, because I was troubled like everybody else, and life gets challenging. And I just started to feel like I felt like it was a business, and what is for sale is what Jesus did, who he is, what he did. And this is what's marketable to this particular audience. And it didn't feel right to me. So pretty quickly, I just started wanting to write songs about what was going on in life. That's just purely as that, not to use our music as a tool for salvation. Or people are like, are you evangelizing or are you edifying the body? Like music's a tool. And Derri was the same way. Music we listened to was just secular music or real music, all of us. And so from pretty early on, we haven't considered ourselves a Christian band, whatever that means. I mean, we are what we are, what our faith, but our songs are just our songs about what we feel and what we're going through. And when as faith and things are woven into the material, I think our audience that stayed with us can know that it comes from a true place. We're not trying to sell anybody anything. No song had nothing I would ever say about my faith was intended to get on Christian radio or have a hit or anything like that. It was all honest reflection. And anyone who's followed us, like I guess some of you guys have for all these decades, that it's just been a journey, a reflection of who we are as people. And if that makes any sense.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't to me.
Doesn't make any sense to you,
Derri? No. Well, I of course was raised Pentecostal, so music was always. I never remember music not being a part of my faith, and it was just intertwined with the whole thing. I mean, I never remember walking in. It was the kind of thing where I was in church literally 4, if not 5 nights a week, for something, youth group, Wednesday night Bible studies. If there was a revival, we had, used to have these revivals back then, and sometimes guys would hold these revivals for 2 and 3 weeks, and you'd literally be in church every night for 2 or 3 weeks, and it was just. At times it was just hell on earth. It was just awful. And at times it was great. But music, the good thing is music was kind of the one thing that held it together for me in that. And, Pentecostals it's a interesting faith. And, it comes from a very poor group of people who were kind of ostracized and outcast back in the late 1800s, early 1900s among, mainline denominations. And And I remember my grandfather telling me stories about their house being burned down one time because the Methodists didn't like them in town, you know, and things like that. And so you have these people that are poor and a lot of them uneducated. And the only way they can grasp, they feel like that the only thing they have is God. That's it. We can grasp a God. We have this, we can speak in tongues. We can do this stuff. And these other people don't want to do that. These other churches don't want to do that. So we're going to do that. And that's our thing. And so that was a prevalent part of my thing growing up. You know, was this whole kind of protectionism of the faith through Pentecostalism. But you know, I rejected it for a long, long time, and then I kind of came to terms with it, and you know, and now I've kind of made peace with just how I grew up, and the fact that my father and my mother were both such good people that and supported me through music that I just don't really have too many bad things to say about it anymore.
Okay. Steve, how did you and Derri meet, and how did the band begin?
Listen closely, I will sing for you a sentimental song.
We had a mutual friend named Tim Chandler who played bass. And he and I went to college together, a college called Azusa Pacific College. We played in school groups, and he was playing with Derri with a TV evangelist named Dwight Thompson. And they were like in the band or something. Because Tim's dad was also a Pentecostal pastor. So him and Derri ended up in that world somehow together. And Tim came to me one time and said, hey, you know, this guy Derri, he writes songs. And Tim knew I was trying to write songs. And he said, you know, we should get together because I think he's writing good songs. And he knows the guys in Daniel Amos, you know. That was like a big deal because they were kind of like, to us, famous band, you know. Like he knows Daniel Amos. Yeah, so like if we did some songs and made a cassette or something, that he could probably get those guys to listen to it, you know. So Tim arranged for us to meet at Derri's church, Derri's dad's church in Cerritos, California. And we went there, and that's when I met Derri. I think it was 1980, I'm thinking. So I was 20 and Tim was 20. I think Derri's 21, I think. And we rehearsed at that church, and that's how it started. And then eventually we practiced a lot, and it was before, you know, I back then our sound was a little more like Southern California, late 70s, like the Eagles or something, you know. It was before we'd probably heard the Police or you know, U2 hadn't even happened yet, you know what I mean? So we hadn't found our sound. And then Tim got in Daniel Amos because Derri was the connection. Derri actually was their roadie. And so Tim got in Daniel Amos, and then we got another bass player, and we called ourselves Youth Choir. And then we got Dan Michaels. 1984, I think, when we actually, before we'd done our first album. So yeah, that's when we became Youth Choir. And we always were rehearsing there at Derri's dad's church. Yeah. Eventually the studio was there. There was a little place, eventually Neverland, that was actually right on the church property there.
Right.
Okay. So how did you guys come up with the name Youth Choir? Whose idea was that, or how did that come about?
Oh gosh, we were just trying to find names, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I could be completely wrong in this, but I thought Terry Taylor came up with it. I might be wrong. I could be wrong.
He claims that he did. So
yeah, he says he did.
I don't remember exactly, but we always hated the name. You know, you change your name all the time when your band's starting out because you just play a gig and you think of a name and you don't think. Then the time that you finally get a record deal, you're like, oh. And then it's terrible to go to a gig and see youth choir, you know, especially if you're playing at a church and it's a youth choir playing tonight. Everyone thinks it's a, you know, it's a terrible idea. It was dumb.
So we changed it to a choir, and then people at the church think that the choir's playing.
Yeah. The whole thing was a terrible name. It was stupid, you know, but we thought, like, to us, youth choir sounded kind of dark because there was like Sonic Youth and the Choir Invisible. There was these cool names that had youth and choir in it back then, you know.
Right.
To us, it sounded kind of like an cool English name, you know.
Yeah, it was dark and mysterious. Yeah.
It's dark and mysterious, but not. It was youth choir, stupidest name ever.
And of course, it started with a Y, so your records are always the last in the bin.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things, the record, when we signed to Word Records, they were like, you know, they wanted us to change. They didn't like the name. They came up with the choir. They said, you know, it'll be earlier in the rack. You know, you got the Beatles, you got, you know, whatever's the Cure, the choir, right? That'll be early when people go through record stores back in those days. Because I don't know, it didn't hurt you too, but whatever.
Terry, being as brilliant as he is, because I'm a huge Daniel Amos fan also, but Terry was probably trying to separate you guys from them because Daniel Amos is closer to the front.
That's right. He really is a selfish guy.
That's another stupid name, Daniel Amos, you know, then of course they had to go DA, you know what I mean? They try to make
DA
it
was
cooler.
the wave name.
Right.
So how did you guys go about getting that first record contract? What were the circumstances behind that?
Oh gosh. Well, I worked at a studio called Whitefield Studios, and it was owned by Maranatha Music. And they had our first record, the youth choir record, came out on a label called Broken Records that Maranatha owned. And they had a thing called the Ministry Resource Center, and what they had is like all these young bands, and you'd go out and play high schools during the day at lunchtime, and then on the weekends there'd be concerts, but they wanted to start putting out records. And so they came up with this Broken Records label. And it was basically, we didn't even have a contract. I mean, it was just like, you guys want to do a record? And it's like, yeah, sure. And we did that record. And then that led to this guy, Ray Nenow, which owned Shadow Records. And we did an EP to go on tour with Steve Taylor. Well, we were going to go on tour with, well, I'm confusing. Steve, you tell it. I'm confusing this.
No, I don't. It was a long time ago.
You remember it, Dan?
Well, yeah, I mean, I came in just as you guys were finishing the first youth choir album, so I didn't perform on that. And if memory serves me right, weren't you, Maranatha Music was owned by Calvary Chapel, right?
Yes, owned by Calvary Chapel.
Yeah, owned by Calvary Chapel. And so wasn't the youth choir first on a compilation album called What's Shaken?
There was one song.
On What's Shaken. And then that probably I'm assuming that led to the relationship to work with Maranatha to do the first album.
Yeah, because I knew Tommy Coombs, who worked there, and he's the one that he said, just do it. Why don't you guys do a record with us? And then there was there was a couple of weird transitions that are kind of hard to put into.
Yeah, we did a thing called Shadow Records, an EP. That didn't work out. The label didn't really, we just got out of that deal and got on Word Records, and that was a pretty good deal. Word was a big company, and it was a pretty good deal. And so we ended up doing 4 albums in 4 years with Word. So we did like 6 albums in 6 years. So we were working, we were on the road. We were on the road. We started touring. We had a van and a trailer, And we are, of all those bands from Southern California, you know, the Ultra Boys, Undercover, all those, there's a bunch of bands. We're about the only ones, I think, that headed across the road. We just started touring, playing really bad gigs. And we toured and we never quit. We wore out 5 vans, you know, and they're all church. Derri's dad let us use the church van, and U-joints would go. Then the puncture the hole in the gas tank, the transmission would go, you know, one thing after the other. We're pulling a trailer. But I remember we went through, and I can see all of these vans in my mind.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Went through 5 of them, you know, just killed them, but because we just kept touring and touring and touring and touring, and not making any money.
Yeah.
At that juncture, Steve, I was blessed and privileged. I've only got to see you guys one time, and it was in 1989 on the Wide Eyed Wonder Tour. It was at Six Flags in St. Louis. You guys were opening for Russ Taff. I was there to see the choir. What I'd like to ask, because I've heard this story and I think it bears repeating, I get tickled. I've either read it or I've seen you guys tell it, but for anybody who hasn't heard this, you guys would purposely pull up next to his tour bus, like when it was in the lot, so people could see the difference, right, between between a big CCM artist bus and like the choirs, you know, what you guys were traveling in. Is that, am I mistaken, or is that right?
I don't recall anything like that, but
I recall that. I actually recall that. We didn't do it throughout the entire tour, but a couple of times, because we were not only that situation. This is how bad it was. So they would play in the bus. You know, they would play their show. They'd be on a bus. We were in a van. So their bus would then drive to the next city overnight while those guys are sleeping. So, but we have to drive overnight, so we don't get any sleep. But we would need to get some sort of shower or something worked in, right? And didn't we kind of take over Russ's? Usually when you go out in a bus tour, they get one room for the driver and one room for showers. And then people take their showers and stuff all that day. And then they basically donated us the room so that we can take our showers and rest for a few minutes before we went on the road. Is that somewhat accurate?
Here's what happened. Okay, the deal was Russ Taff and his wife got a room because Russ was the star, you know, and he got to go to his room and hang out as long. The bus driver had a room. Okay, so the bus driver would check out and one room would be, I think Robin got a room. Robin got the bus driver's room. And then we would wait for Russ and Tori, his wife, to check out before we got to go into his room. But he'd stay in there till like 2 a.m. or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. So we kept going to the desk. Is the room ready? Did Russ leave his key? Did Russ leave his key? No, not yet. No, not yet. So we would end up just wandering around, Derri, me, and Dan, all night long. Every city, we would just forget it. We kept not even asking. We just would go and see any place that was still open, we'd be in. We're wandering the streets of whatever city it was until 2 a.m. And finally they'd say, yeah, he left his key. And then we'd go in there for whatever, like Dan says, a little short time, and then get up in time to drive, whatever the 6 or 7 hour drive, to be at the sound check at 5, you know.
Right.
So it was brutal. And most of the time, and night after night, we never played for, 2,000, 3,000 people all the time. It was big gigs, but they hated us. I mean, the audience overwhelmingly hated us. You could feel the disdain, and there'd be like maybe a few people up front, 100 people, 50 people up front to see us, but you got a couple thousand people that are just like, what is this? This is not.
Oh, we get lectured. People come out and lecture us at our merchandise booths, and and to put it all again, Russ and those guys were fantastic people to us.
They were great. Yeah, they were great.
Yeah.
They treated us really, really well. It had nothing to do with them. You know, it was just our music just didn't.
Yeah,
fit.
it was, our circumstances were that we couldn't afford a hotel room. So we, you know, beggars weren't choosy. We had to take a used room, you know, at
You're right.
wherever it was available.
Happy for reasons have I. Happy for notions have you. I see the sky is as blue as the ocean. You say you know it's true. So tie your shoelaces to my shoelaces. I'll tie a rope to a tree. We'll see how the wind whips happy for faces. Come go away with me.
I'm curious, Derri, really quick, if you don't mind, if it's okay to ask, what were the people lecturing you guys on or about?
Mainly just that we didn't preach enough. Our lyrics weren't, you know, it was
They weren't.
the whole typical why are you guys a Christian? You know,
Well, they were disappointed in Russ because he wasn't like the Imperials anymore. You know, they thought of Russ
Right.
from the Imperials. And even Russ was changing. And I
I
mean,
mean,
Russ
he
is
had done that record, the Winds of Change or something like that, or he was doing an America. It was like an Americana.
I think the way home.
The way home.
the way
The
home.
Way Home. That's what it was. The Way Home.
It was a cool record, and he was playing, really guitar oriented, no keyboards. You know, I
Yeah,
mean,
he rocked during that time.
it was
more
very
rock,
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was more rock, and his audience was dismayed. Let alone, us. What the heck is that?
Yeah.
Where's the salt, bro?
Yeah.
Well, I was there to see you guys.
There were a couple
Good.
nights. There were a couple nights where literally people would get up and take their youth group out of when we were playing.
Yeah, I remember, I have two stories, if you will. One was in Minneapolis on that Russ Taff tour. And we were at the merch table because after our show, during the break, after Russ's show, we would be at the merch table trying to sell whatever we had. And I remember a kid kind of coming up to us and saying, "You guys are demon possessed." And he went on to say that he saw demons like floating around us on stage, and just above us is these kind of like spirits, evil spirits flying around to us. And I go, "You sure that wasn't the fog machine?" And, and so I remember that one. And then my favorite one is, I forget what market it was, what city it was in, but we were lined behind the merch table. So we had, it was Derri was here, Robin, Steve, then Robin, and then me. And so so there actually was a line, 20, 30 people. And when they got to Derri, they're like, "Oh man, I love your guitar sounds. I remember this song and that song," and asked all these questions about his playing and his voice and the music. And then they got up to Steve and they were like, "Oh, your lyrics, this, that, and the other thing." And then, then talk about his drumming, and we talk about drums. And the same guy, came up to Robin, was like, "Oh, you play a fretless bass. What's that called?" "Oh, that's a Steinberger." And then they talked about hats, because she wore hats, and that she was a fretless, not a Steinberg bass player. And then they came up to me and they look at me, and around that time, I was losing my hair at an early age, and he kind of looked at me, kind of looked up and goes, "When you're playing up on stage, you seem so confident and just so relaxed and kind of into everything, so much energy. How do you find that with, how do you find that with the fact that you're going bald?" And I just kind of looked at him and I was like, I don't know. It just works out. All these deep questions and all these musical questions. And for me, he's just like, "Why are you confident? Because dude, you're going bald."
How do you play when you're bald? That is funny, man.
Yeah.
People say anything.
Well,
I just wanted to input a little something. So I grew up around the Pentecostal scene as well. And I can remember back, in the 80s, people, preachers being out there, preaching against rock and even Christian rock and all that. And I remember hearing some preacher somewhere along the way talk about that very thing that you said about being at a concert and seeing demons flying around so I think that was just a story that got passed around back in those days.
Oh, yeah. Well, Pentecostals tend to exaggerate a lot of things. So,
Yeah. I'm so sorry. I just have one more. More. Okay. So I play the sax, right? And I also play an electronic instrument called a lyricon. It was called a lyricon. It's called something different now, but I still call it a lyricon. And, people were always kind of intrigued by that because it sounded like a keyboard, but had the expressiveness of a wind instrument. And so we're playing at some church basement in Kentucky, and there's a youth group there along with the youth group pastor. And I was playing and people were like watching. And then after the show, they came up and some people came up and was like, what is that instrument that you're playing? I'm like, because I use all these effects and echo and stuff on it. So I play a little bit. And then, okay, so that ends. The kids kind of go away. I see the pastor talking to him, youth pastor talk to him. Youth pastor comes back up to me and says, man, great show. That was fantastic. But I had to rebuke the kids in the youth group. I'm like, why? Well, because they were expressing a lust for the lyricon.
A lust for the lyricon.
Lust for the lyricon. So
that's a good lyric. That's actually a good lyric idea, Steve.
That's a good lyric idea.
Lust for the lyricon.
That would be a great instrumental track, Dan. The Lust
Yeah,
for the Lyricon.
right. Yeah.
I do want to go back just a couple years because this is like a huge landmark thing. You guys were the first band to play at the first Cornerstone Festival. Can you tell us what the story was behind that, how you got to do that, how you were the first band?
Oh, yeah. Well, see, Undercover was kind of a big deal back then in our scene. They were starting to get noticed nationally or whatever. And they got invited to play Cornerstone. And Joe Taylor, he said, yeah, okay, we'll do it. But really, we want you to take these other, because he was an advocate. He was sort of the spokesman of a group of us. He said, I want you to take these other three bands also, which is the Lifters, Undercover, and Youth Choir. He said, oh, we were unheard. We were not known. We didn't even have an album yet. It was 1984. We didn't have an album. We were unknown. And the other bands were too. And so they're like, okay, well, we're already booked up. The whole festival's booked. There's no slots open. And then somebody came up with the idea, well, I know what we could do. There's this side stage. There's this other building, not the main stage. There's the side stage, like a big building and we could put these bands in there and they could play at noon before the festival even starts, right? The festival didn't start till nighttime. But they're like, okay, so who goes first but Youth Choir? Us, the most unknown band. So it was the actual bottom. You can't get lower billing than that. You're playing at noon before the festival even starts. And so that's why we got to be the first band that ever played Cornerstone.
Right.
And but what happened was we played, and then the Ultra Boys played, then the Lifters played, then Undercover played. Well, I think Undercover played at night, or they had a main stage slot. But it was so popular, people heard us and started flocking into this building. And before you knew it, by the end of our set, the place was packed.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the other bands. And so there was such a buzz about it throughout the festival that they said, hey, what if after the last night, Saturday night, the end of the festival, since all these people have been hearing about you guys, you all get to play. So at midnight, after Cornerstone on a Saturday night, they had us, Ultra Boys, Lifters, and Undercover all play late into the night. And that's what started that whole night stage that went on Cornerstone for forever. That was such a hit that they had
the midnight stage.
No other festival would dream of having a midnight side stage thing. But that became tradition. It was like a very sought after slot. Like we didn't want to play the main stage. We wanted to play the midnight slot on the side stage. that was and it was packed and it was like a vibe, you know. So that's how that started.
Yeah.
Cool.
'Cause I'm already dying. I'm already flying. It seems like I'm flying towards the sun. Yes, I'm already dying. I'm already flying. In my dreams, I'm flying towards the sun.
Guys, if y'all don't mind talking about Cornerstone, Rex brought up y'all being the first band, of course, and you guys, and I think this is an honor, you guys were the very last band that they asked to play to when Cornerstone, you know, ceased. What were your all's thoughts about that going through your head when y'all were asked to, you know, I feel like that's an honor because they asked you guys to.
And that kind of had to be emotional for you guys, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was. It definitely was. I mean, you know, we had been like, I had been at Cornerstone and one either with the choir or Lost Dogs or Terry Taylor every year but 3. There was only 3 years wasn't at Cornerstone, and those 3 were pretty early. So we had all, and I think that's with Steve and Dan, a lot of them too. But we had seen it go from this start to just being huge. And then all of a sudden, at one point, you start to see the decline, you know, and some of the other bigger festivals, like Cornerstone was pretty adamant about not having, they didn't want it to be mainstream, what's on the radio, Christian rock. They wanted, you know, they wanted it to be still that same place where there's all these cool bands that some of them you've heard of, some of them haven't. But, you know, watching it over the years, and then that last year, there was something really bittersweet about it for me, because there wasn't hardly anybody there. Everything, all the stages were different. There was really only the one little main stage, and it wasn't even big. It was like kind of in the middle of the food court.
Well, they had very little money is what happened.
They didn't have money. They ran out of money.
So they couldn't pay. They couldn't hire the big famous bands.
Right.
They couldn't afford it. They didn't pay. Everybody was like that played was like didn't pay. It wasn't very much money, you know.
Yeah, and the last year, that final year, a lot of bands play for free. They just didn't charge anything. But there was a time where they had money that they could have paid, but they just chose another direction.
Do you guys think that? What do you guys? Forgive me. What do you guys think the reason for the decline of? Do you think it's just the music soundscape or the music scene in general for the decline, or what do you guys attribute to that?
We weren't behind the scenes. I know there was some political stuff that happened. I know there was some support pulled because of different beliefs or something. You know, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think a lot of it is, I think the one, you know, Cornerstone did most things right when it came to their festival. But I think one thing that they did is at one point they started doing almost entirely like hard rock and metal. And I think that alienated some other people that had come for the more like Over the Rhines and us and some other things like that. And I think that kind of started the decline, and the fact that, you know, Christian radio at that point it started going the whole worship route.
Right, that's true.
And so there was no Christian radio for these kind of bands. Even the rock shows kind of went away, you know. And you had, you know, festivals like Creation, and what's the one in Atlanta, Dan?
Atlanta Fest and all. And as I'm talking, you'll probably hear some dogs barking in the background. I'm sorry about that. There's nothing I can do. But the other festivals had just barrels full of cash to do marketing for their festival. They blasted their festival on Christian airwaves. They had, you know, probably mailing lists and email lists, and worked with all the big churches in the region to get people to come. Cornerstone didn't have that. You know, they didn't have the ability to market themselves as a premier festival. I'm speculating that, you know, somebody, after you play this, somebody from Cornerstone might come on and say, well, no, that's not the case. But I don't remember seeing, you know, a lot of national marketing going on, whereas Creation and Spirit West Coast and Atlanta Fest and all those others had barrels full of cash and could do all that stuff and then attract those people to their festivals.
Well, the other thing too is that these other festivals weren't a community like Cornerstone was. Cornerstone was not just, didn't exist just to put on a festival every year. They were a community. They fed, you know, all these people every day. They housed them. And I remember talking to Glenn those last couple of years, and he was like, we just can't justify the money anymore to put in when we have all these other programs that we need to do that are more important than this. And so that, I think, it ended up being the biggest deal, because they weren't just living for the festival. They were like a working community that was really doing the job in the inner city of Chicago. So they couldn't put their money, they just couldn't do it anymore with a clear conscience.
The silver syringe before bells chime, the devil entices the children of time. Children of time. Fast injection for the children.
Well, in 1988, you guys released Chase the Kangaroo, and in 1990, you released Circle Slide, which I feel is probably two of your better albums from your early career. Could you guys just talk about both of those a little bit? If there's anything you want to talk about those, or did you know that, I mean, people really revere those albums. Did you know you had something special with both of those?
Go on, laugh. Go and cry. It's alright. There's something wonderful about love. There's something wonderful about love. There's something lost about me with you. There's something blind about the chosen few. There's something wonderful about love.
So we had opened our studio and Neverland, and we had our first album, Diamonds and Rain, was one that Charlie Peacock produced, and he did a fantastic job. It just didn't turn out exactly the way we wanted it to turn out, and a lot of that was our fault. A lot of that was on me, because I didn't bring a lot of musical ideas to that one, you know. But anyway, we open our studio, and we go in, and the record company, we told them we want to produce ourselves, and they were saying no, you know, we'll find a producer. And basically, we took our album budget, and we had opened the studio. We started producing what they thought was demos. But in our mind, we were making the record, and we weren't going to do demos. We weren't going to have anybody produce us again at that point. And so we just made this record, and we kind of kept the record company at bay. Our A&R guy, Tom Willett, you know, he'd want to come down, and sometimes we'd let him, sometimes we'd say no, you know. And so that record, we end up getting the whole record done, and they're like, okay, so, you know, that's good. It's really good. Now let's figure out who's going to produce it. And like, no, that's the record. It's mixed. It's done. Here, take it.
Oh, yeah.
We're out of money. We spent all the money.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
So anyway, from there, they accepted it. And, you know, of course, there was no radio for us at that point. Rock radio was around, but rock radio was just, what was it, Dan, like an hour show on a weekend, or 2 hour shows on a weekend, or
Right, right. I mean, yeah, there was like a rock chart and everything, but I think maybe we got top 5 or number 1 with Consider or something like that on it. I think I remember that. But yeah, they were just specialty shows for the most part. On Christian. So it'd be a Christian radio station in Cleveland playing, the normal AC, CCM stuff. And then some guy would have a show from 8 to midnight on Saturday.
Yeah.
So it wasn't pushing the needle for us marketing wise. But don't you think that because of that record and the touring that we did, it kind of justified and there was still a desire from Word for us to kind of continue doing another record?
Well, yeah, I think it was very well received, as far as critics and sales or whatever they're going to be, but it was very well received. And I think that we really gained our confidence with that record. We kind of really hit our sound.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of finding our way with our process up to that point. Took a long time to make Chase the Kangaroo, like many weeks, and at Derri's studio, and we just did it ourselves, like Derri said. But we didn't agree on everything, a lot of push and shove in the process.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, we realized that we felt like we made a masterpiece. So we felt like we did something that sonically, you hear Clouds or something like that, and like there was nothing like it. No one else had.
Right.
I mean, that soundscape that Derri did on Clouds, just like that was before they had this genre now known as ambient music or whatever. It was very innovative, I think, and so we're proud of it, and I think we found our creative identity with that, and just like we were determined, I think to just keep on going, and I guess that just falling in love with making music for the sake of music, the excitement of it,
Mm-hmm.
making an album like that, we were like, it propelled us, so whatever it sold or didn't sell, from then on, I think we just started making music we wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Well, if I may say,
we sold every record of ours sold more than the last one. So it wasn't like we were losing sales at that point. We were gaining them, but it just wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't what obviously what a guy like Russ Taff or somebody did. It wasn't even close to that. Yeah. But it was enough for them to say, well, look, they sold more this record than last record, so let's let them have another shot at it.
Right.
I just like to say really quick, and I absolutely love this album. This was my first encounter with the choir, and guys, I grew up a headbanger. Kiss was the first band back in the 70s that I encountered, and I loved and still do love the 80s hair metal bands or whatever you want to call them. But guys, just Christian rock was at a premium. If just for lack of a better term, Christian rock, for a guy who wanted to rock out. And I would search for anything back in the 80s that seemed like it was going to rock in some capacity. I came across this album. I didn't know anything about the choir. And when I bought it and I took it home and I put it in, and I just want to say that, here we are all these years later, and guys, you guys have made me a fan. It was different than anything I'd ever heard. And I'm still here because the music is just simply great. And so Chase the Kangaroo did that for me. So
thank you.
Anyway.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening.
Well, I believe it was in 1993, you guys moved from California to Nashville. Could you tell us why you did that? Was that just the music industry was moving that way, or why did you decide to do that?
Because the wolf was howling, because the moon was on the rise, because the sun was fading, because the storm was in her eyes. She's a wicked.
The economy got really bad in Southern California. It was really hard to survive. We couldn't. We had Derri's wife Marley at the time was in the business marketing person, and got offered a job out there. That was impetus for him. But at that time, there was a word. There were labels in California that closed up, went to Nashville. Everybody was kind of moving to Nashville in that industry, but also the economy. People were moving to Nashville because there was a chance you could maybe buy a house there or something. In LA, just in general. So it was kind of a desperation move. I mean, speaking for myself,
Yeah.
I had 2 little girls, 5 and 3, and we just got in a yellow truck and went, took a big risk just to try to. And I didn't know I'd be able to keep doing music. I just thought maybe I could find some kind of work, do something, because we just weren't. I was surviving financially. I didn't know what to do.
Right. Yeah, and Nashville we thought, it would be easier to tour from there. Steve and I both had kids, started having kids. And so we thought, well, maybe we can, if the band keeps going, we can tour easier and it'll be cheaper to live. And not only that, but the scene in Southern Cal, even though we'd been on the road for all those years, we'd been on the road, that scene had dried up in Southern California at that point. There was no more, it wasn't like Undercover and Altar Boys and all those guys were going, and there were shows everywhere to play. You couldn't play a show. There was no shows left in Southern California for a band like us, except clubs, and clubs didn't, and we played clubs, but clubs didn't pay.
And you have to drive all the way. You have to drive all the way across the country from California to start the tour, basically Midwest. Whereas in Nashville, all the cities are 4 hours apart. I think that's why it's the music hub. I think that's why it is for all the music industry. It's the hub because it's located. You could do a tour, a circle. Whereas the West Coast, California, like doing the West Coast, you could start in San Diego and go up to Seattle, and then where do you go from there?
Right.
No gigs in Utah and Montana, and in Wyoming. So you have to. Whereas to tour, you have to rent. Sometimes you rent a van or a trailer or whatever, and you do a circle. It's very hard to tour out of the West.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, you also released in 1993 independently Kisses and Killers. Did you record that in Nashville then? And just was like, okay, we're going to see what happens with this? Or how did that happen?
That was the last thing we recorded in Southern California.
Okay.
And originally it was a demo. We didn't even have the choir. Our idea is we would call it Kisses and Killers, and that's why it's just on a blank white thing. And we realized that after we got back from the Russ Taff tour, we did Circle Slide. We realized that we had no chance of succeeding commercially in the quote Christian market or whatever. So we had a hope that we would find a way out of there, and just did that basically an 8-song demo on our own, not on a label, and called it Kissers and Killers. And interestingly, we did that the very same time we did a record called At the Foot of the Cross, because we had a distribution deal through Word to do. So it's kind of like we had a foot in the dock and a foot on the boat, because but we realized, look, if we're going to do something in the Christian market, let's do something that is viable, a worship album, right? And let's make a worship album we would like to hear.
Right.
Let's not try to, it wasn't a sellout or anything like let's make worship music that comes from the heart. And then we did, up to that point, I would say Issues of Faith had been integrated, like an album like Chase the Kangaroo or Circle Slide. There is Restore My Soul. There is Merciful Eyes. There is songs about faith integrated. But at that point, we completely separated. We did Kissers and Killers, which were just nothing but sort of twisted love songs. And then At the Foot of the Cross was a worship album. But to us, there's always that tension, that dichotomy. And at that point in early 90s, both of those records were right before we moved to Nashville.
Such a fun time we share when we're together. It's a fun thing to carry on and on. Such a good, great gift. All the years we've weathered. It's a fine thing to carry on and on.
Well, then in 2005, you released Oh, How the Mighty Have Fallen. And then in 2010, you released Burning Like the Midnight Sun. And I'm gonna do a quote here. The Chicago Sun-Times called Burning Like the Midnight Sun a late career triumph. It's best since 1990's Circle Slide. You know, I really enjoy that album. And Steve, you and me were talking earlier, and you said that was probably your favorite choir album. Can you tell me one, like, why was there a 5-year gap between How the Mighty Have Fallen and Burning Like the Midnight Sun, and how was it to make Burning Like the Midnight Sun? I really enjoy that album.
I'm not going down behind the mountain. I'm never gonna fade away. I'm burning like the midnight sun. Burning like the midnight sun. I'm not gonna sink into the ocean. Baby, I'm here to stay. I'm burning like the midnight sun. Burning like the midnight sun. I'm not going down.
Well, we weren't making a living. Okay, the choir was not making us a living. It never really did. Okay, it was like never commercially successful. So we were trying to figure out what possibly to do to survive. And in 2000, we did this thing called City on a Hill, you know, and that first City on a Hill album was the only commercially successful thing I've ever been involved in. And and I co-wrote the song God of Wonders with Mark Bird, which was very successful. Mm-hmm. And that kind of set me on a career path that was different, producing other bands and trying to make a living. And Derri was becoming an engineer. Derri always was an engineer, but just trying to do things that paid to survive. And the choir didn't. There was no money in it ever. So when we did it, I guess when we did 2005, what album was that? Flap Your Wings?
Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, How the Mighty Have Fallen.
Oh. Well, we just did it to do it. But it wasn't, I don't know. Can anyone help me with this? I mean,
sure.
Yeah.
Help me out.
Yeah. Well, okay. So as I recall it, you know, so we did Kissers and Killers. Then, you know, we moved to, you know, we shopped that demo around. We got looked at by a bunch of different record labels. Didn't work out. So we moved to Nashville, and we said there's a record label called REX out there, and we talked to them about the idea of re-releasing Kissers and Killers with some extra songs, and that ended up being Speckled Bird.
I'm your sunshine trucking man, doing everything I can to realize the yellow skies.
Does that seem accurate to you guys?
Right. That's right. Keep going, Dan. Yeah,
okay.
That's right.
Yeah. So we did Speckled Bird, and we were still touring, everything like that, doing our thing. And then Steve and Derri got a publishing deal with a company called Benson Music. And so they started, you know, working as writers. I think Steve was also producing things at the time. Derri was engineering and mixing things at the time. And so they had this publishing deal, and Steve and Derri heard from their publisher that they wanted to start a rock imprint label, like similar to Tooth and Nail. And they were going to call it Tattoo Records. They had an A&R guy, but they wanted somebody to do the marketing. Well, I was doing the marketing for our production company called Glasshouse Records. So I didn't know what I was doing. I was just making stuff up, you know, to help market our those releases that we put out. So Steve and Derri recommended to the publisher, saying, hey, you should talk to Dan Michaels. You know, he's done marketing for our label. So I ended up getting a job at Tattoo Records, which is part of Benson, this kind of, you know, For Him, you know, all this kind of stuff. And we ended up putting out a choir record called Free Flying Soul.
I am the ocean,
So we did that, and during that time, Steve and Derri were producing, and I think you guys produced the Common Children record, doing more stuff. But there was, I think, some tension, with at least with me and you guys, or maybe between all of us, because the choir wasn't really going anywhere, and there was other opportunities. I remember Derri coming to the studio with, we used to call it Neverland. We're in, downtown Nashville. And said, hey, this is like maybe 1996. It was like, I think we need to call it quits, And I remember that cold pit of my stomach, in there. So we had done like a tour. It wasn't our favorite tour, in my opinion. I think there was a lot of tension on the road. And so we took a break. We didn't play for maybe 4 years. And then there's a festival in Albuquerque that reached out to us either in late 99 or 2000, that invited us to play. So I talked the guys into going and played. And we enjoyed ourselves, I think, at this festival. I think it was kind of sparked things a little bit. And so that led to us getting back together and recording Flap Your Wings. Now, course correct me as I'm going along, but we kind of were like, let's call it quits. X amount of years gap, we kind of do this festival. It's like, hey, we're cool together again. Let's do Flap Your Wings. And then, so we did that, and really proud of the fact that it got nominated for a Grammy Award, actually. So that was a really cool thing. So there wasn't really big plans to do anything with the choir beyond that. And like I said, Steve, and Derri were producing and doing other things. I think maybe we played some gigs, some cornerstones and stuff like that, but we weren't pursuing the choir. I was working at a record label that ended up being the record label that helped break the band Mercy Me. And so, that's when Flap Your Wings came out. I was working at a different record label, working for Mercy Me. So we did that. I'm working at a label. These guys are busy. And then I think just 4 or 5 years later, didn't we just kind of say, it's time to do another record? Let's give it a whirl.
Yeah.
As simple as that.
Yeah. And I think you're the one that came to Steve and I and said, let's just do another record. Because you had your Galaxy 21 imprint.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we, that was, but yeah, we kind of had done this other stuff and taken a break, but we played Cornerstone during those years. And we, I remember we'd be like going out there and we'd have to find like 1 or 2 other gigs to make it worth it money wise or whatever.
But then what happened after that was the social media thing happened, right. Facebook, it wasn't before. So it was very easy to disappear as if you're an old band, just lose your audience. But then what happened with all the social media, the Facebook and all that, all of a sudden people are finding us. Our original old audience has kind of found us, and we found them and found a way to communicate. Mm-hmm. I think that's what resurrected a lot of bands. Reconnect. Reconnect with their audience. And so I think, if I'm not mistaken, Burning Like the Midnight Sun Dan might have paid for it. You might have paid for it, Dan. I don't know.
You're right.
I think so.
Because Dan was the only one that was successful at all, and working at a label, had a legitimate job,
Well, so, can I interject something in there on it? Because, Steve, we're all kind of collectors of our archives, we had material, like old album covers and T-shirts and newsletters and things like that. So I had a bunch of that stuff at my house where I was living at in Nashville. And one day, I decided, I'm like, I'm going to learn how to build a website. I'm just going to learn. And so I actually paid some guy to come to my house and teach me how to build a website. And then, so I'm like, well, he said, what kind of website do you want to create? And I go, well, because you're going to need to put up a lot of content. And I go, okay, let's make a website for the choir, because I have all this content that we put up. We can put up some music, we can put up some pictures and photos and everything. And then after I built the website, I created a message board. And on this message board that I nicknamed the monkey board, suddenly we just started, we started hearing from these people that liked us. And so we'd interact on this message board. We'd start getting emails, and that kind of, for me, it was inspiring. And I think then I said, it's time to do another record. There's still people out there that like us on there. So it was basically the fan base that inspired us to kind of go at it again. That's my recollection.
Love is alive in you. Love is alive in you. Believe in your own reflection. See it in my eyes. Love is alive in you. Don't say it isn't true. Believe in the resurrection. See it in my eyes.
Basically, Rex, we have Dan to thank for all these great albums that
I
have come out
think
in the
so
past.
too. Yeah.
Well, you do. You actually do. Dan he's been the one that's kind of pushed Steve and I, over the last 10 years or whatever, just like, let's do this now. Let's do that now,
Yeah.
So Dan, we have a lot. Dan has been a huge part of that whole thing.
Wonderful. Well, then,
And then they entered the era of Kickstarters, which is a new thing where you could have crowdfunding, and our audience that had been loyal to us for decades come on board. And, it's gotten to where music is free, right? I mean, you don't have to pay for music. If you want it, just get it, listen to it, But then you have other people that'll pay $500 because they can, and they want to support us, and they'll just, whatever.
and you can get nice things like
Oh, there you go.
handwritten lyric sheets for
Right, things
for,
like that.
Yeah.
Yes, which this is one of my prized possessions, Steve and Derri, and Dan. So yeah, that just seems like a good fit for a lot of bands just going the Kickstarter route. But I'm assuming the first one was a little bit scary to do. Was it? Were you concerned, or did you know that your fan base with the message board was pretty big and that it would probably work out?
Go higher, go deeper. Surrender, let go. The laughter of heaven echoes in your
That was, did we do that one for Shadow Weaver?
Yes, that was
Okay.
the first one, I believe.
First
Yeah.
one, it's risky, yeah.
Yeah, it was risky. I think I financed the Loudest Sound Ever Heard on that one. And then we went the crowdfunding source. I had no idea. I might have pretended like I was confident that it was going to work, but I had no idea.
We didn't know. We didn't know.
Yeah, yeah.
We didn't know, but Dan and Lisa, they kind of do that stuff, they
Put it together. They
navigate it. Lisa does most of the work, mailing out. There's a lot of work doing a Kickstarter. There's
Oh, yeah.
a lot of work to people have no idea how much it costs. People think, oh, we got $40,000. What are they going to do? No, that it takes a lot of money to make the product and to deliver it, to create it, send it, but and a lot of work. And Lisa has done that, and the hours that she puts in post after the record is unbelievable.
And she also books the band too, for tours.
Right.
So she's kind of our handler as far as anything, Kickstarter and basically e-commerce, our website, but also books the band as well.
Yeah, that's right. She does.
So
She does a good job.
Yes, she
I'm not
does.
sure why. I'm not sure why she does that, but
I'm nobody's angel, I'm not that good. I'm no red devil in the wicked mood. I'm a dedicated minister and a downright sinister man.
And then in sad news, in 2018, your bassist Tim Chandler passed away. Could you guys share a story about Tim, something interesting or something that you really remember him?
Oh, well, there's so many.
I remember meeting Tim for the first time at the Ichthus Festival in Kentucky. He wasn't playing with us at the time. He was playing with Daniel Amos. I think we had Mike Sauerbrey at the time. And I remember being in the backstage and product tent and seeing this tall, handsome, imposing man, just walking around and just kind of commanding, the room. Basically, he can run a room. And I was just like, wow, who is that guy? Who is that guy? And I go to, at one point after that day or the next day, and he was around, I saw him again at the merch tent. I was like, who is that guy? I think he's really important.
Yeah.
And Steve goes, what? Oh no, that's the bass player for Daniel Amos. Yeah, he used to play in our band. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
like I thought maybe he was a big time record exec or the guy that owned the Ichthus Festival. I thought he was like this big old deal. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, he's a bass player.
Nice.
No, he was a great bass player. Yeah, I go all the way back when we were 19. We were playing together in different bands and things. One story I like to tell is like he, at one point they had a house, a pretty nice house, and he had a swimming pool, and we would gather there on Saturday nights. It was like the hangout, and he'd be sitting there at the table right by the pool, and we'd always be arguing about stuff. It might be like, why I hate Steely Dan and why he likes Steely Dan's the best band ever, or it could have been politics or whatever, but we're arguing. It gets into a thing. And I'm always up on my feet, moving around, kind of like agitator. I'm a bit of an agitator. And I like to get Tim mad, and he's a big guy, I'm this little guy, and he's like, 6'4", and you know what I mean? But I would get him really agitated, and he'd keep saying, at some point he'd go, Steve, you're going in the pool. You're going in the pool. I go, ha, ha, ha. But I would be like, I would take my cell phone out and put it on the table. I'd take my glasses off because I knew that if at any point he decided I was going in the pool, I was, I'd had this fantasy that like, I would like duck down and take him in with me, somehow, but he, he never did. But I put that in a song, I knew he loved me too much to throw me into the pool.
Yeah, nice.
He was a gentle person, He had an imposing, like Dan said, there was something imposing about his presence, but, he was a tender-hearted, gentle, loving guy,
Yeah. Well, Tim and I were roommates for a while. Oh, here's the dogs. Hey, doggies.
They're alert dogs. They're these American Eskimos, and they're bred to like be. That's what they do. They're doing their job,
They are.
They yip, yip, yip. That's just part of the deal. When you go over, it's like they're gonna for 2 or 3 minutes. It's yip, 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 yip. And they're happy. That's but that's
they're happy people are here.
Yeah,
they gotta do it. That's what they're there. Yeah, right.
Awesome.
They're yippers.
Yeah. So Tim and I were roommates for a while. We lived with this guy. My dad and mom had a house. They rented us, and it was me and Tim and this guy Chris Pumphrey and another guy Leo, Leo was our road manager for a long time.
Everybody in the band appreciated Leo.
Right, exactly. And so we were all roommates, and we were always playing jokes on each other, and it was a pretty fun. We were there for like 2 years, and it was pretty fun. It was nonstop stuff going on. So one day I wake up, and I'm going in to take a shower, and my bathroom really smells, it just like really smells. I'm going, what is that? And I noticed down in the toilet, I lift up the toilet lid, and there's this huge fish that Tim had stuck in the toilet. He had gone to the store and bought this fish with the head and the tail and everything on it. And he had put it in my toilet where the head is kind of sticking out of the toilet where you see it and the lid is laying on top of the head, It was just like, it had been in there probably like all day and night the day before because I wasn't home. And then it was like, oh man, my bathroom smelled so bad. But see, Tim was always doing stuff like that.
I'm sorry, one more, Tim, then. With that reminded me of something. When we're in California, and so I, obviously got to know Tim over the years, and but we're in California, and I lived in a city called Pomona, and it's a bad part of town. The especially a place where I lived. It was bars on the window type place, and I lived alone. And I worked like a graveyard shift, at a day job and stuff. And then, but on the weekends, I would sleep in till so late. And one day I remember there being kind of a knock at the door, like a little rattling of the gate. There was like an iron gate at my door. I felt a little rattling, and I was like, and I'm just, what is that? I'm kind of still groggy. And then I was like, I just kind of didn't mind it. I let it go. And then like about an hour or so later, I opened the door and I see something down on my doorstep, and it's a freaking salad. It's a salad. It's this big mound of lettuce with vegetables and carrots, like carefully couturied, salad of like cherry tomatoes, shredded cheese, and like blue cheese dressing and stuff on it. Not in a bowl, but just on my doorstep. It was a full blown major gourmet salad. What?
It wasn't on a plate.
No. It was shaped. It was just hand shaped. Without a plate, sitting on my doorstep. I was scared. That scared the heck out of me, because I thought maybe, I was like, my mind was racing, and I was still so groggy. I was like, was I just marked by a gang? Because there's gangs around there. Is that a sign? Is that some kind of thing, like, or there's a crazy man or whatever. And so it remained a mystery until Tim finally admitted sometime later that I think it was him and Mark Serkin drove all the way from wherever they lived in Southern California, which is, takes a long time. You can't just go across town in 20 minutes. They had to fight traffic, get their way to Pomona, and had all these ingredients to make this gourmet chef salad, and left it on my doorstep.
Dan was a victim of the blue cheese salad gang.
Yeah.
One thing I want to mention and ask anyone who's a fan if they want to support is in March 2021, you guys start your own Patreon page, which I'm a member of it, and there's several different levels, and I just love it. You guys have, and I'm not just saying this, you have one of the best Patreon pages, I think. I'm a member of several different bands and whatnot, and I really enjoy your guys's page. I enjoy the videos with Steve cooking and repairing screen doors, and I mean, you don't know what you're going to get, which I kind of like that. Really, it's just like everyday life stuff and whatnot. So I'm really glad you guys started that, and you at one level you can get a song every month. How has that been for you guys? Do you get a lot of feedback? Do fans like it?
I think people seem to really like it. We're kind of holding steady. We're trying to get some more people in. But one thing I really like about it personally is that I'm a procrastinator. So for me to have to write a song, to go in with Steve and write a song every month is like a good thing. It makes me do something I normally wouldn't do. Because we've never really written, we don't have like, when you look at 77s and people like that, they have all these demos of all this stuff. We don't have anything like that up until now, because now we've started doing it. But we always just wrote for the record. It'd be time to do a record. Okay, let's write a bunch of songs for the record. So for me, it's really it's really been a good exercise as far as just, making me do something I normally wouldn't do.
And we're stylistically free because it doesn't have to be on a choir record. We don't have to, doesn't have to be genius or something. It can just be whatever it is, because you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is like, you wouldn't think that's a lot, but it is a lot. Like every time, last month, I was really pleased with the song that we offered. I felt like we came across one, we did one that definitely would be on an album if we did it. So now here we are into the next month, and I'm like, oh no, I don't have a thought in my head. One thought I could be done. What if I'm done? What if I never have another song idea? But we kind of have to, and that's good. We've done it every time, and also because we're in this little place at Dan and Lisa's house, we can't have drums. We don't have room for drums, so I've got this little electronic stuff. Derri's programming. Derri's doing a lot more keyboard stuff. So yeah, in order to go do drums and hire a bass player, because we don't have a bass player in the band, Derri plays a little, but we don't want to pay money because we're trying to do Kickstarter to make a little money. So it's putting pressure on us to do things differently. And we're enjoying it. I think both of us are enjoying. And eventually, I think a lot of these songs will be on an album, and we might reapproach them. I mean, I'll definitely go in and play real drums. We'll definitely hire bass if it's not on there, and maybe change it. Who knows what will change or not? But it's like a little sandbox. It's like they're giving us an opportunity. People are really, the people that are supporting us on this Patreon are really keeping us buoyant. They're keeping us afloat, and it's really helping us. So yeah, it's good. It's different, and it's good.
Well, we don't want to keep you. I have one last question. What message or thought would you guys want to relay or say to all your fans over the years?
Dan?
Well, I mean, it kind of goes along with, the story of, creating a website and an opportunity for, I always hate using the word fans. I want to call them friends or listeners, something like that. So these folks that kind of kept us going. So that's very meaningful, to get feedback and know that you did something that mattered to people. I don't take that for granted. I think that's just we all love working with each other. We all love each other very much. So, to have that listener support and our relationship, it's very meaningful, and we hope to continue it.
A long time ago, I found my motivation thinking in terms of every individual is important. And, we never, like I said, we didn't have a real broad commercial success. We don't expect to, but we have our fans, like our listeners have been really faithful and loyal. And a lot of them know every word, and it's so gratifying. Yeah, we can play in about any city and have a room full of people. No, we can't pack a big room, but if you go into a living room in some city and there are 30 people in there and they're singing every word, man, that's a great experience. And it's wonderful that they carry these songs in their hearts for decades. And I always say at the end of every record is like, thank you for listening. And it means so much that people like listen closely, and that's motivation enough.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's always surprising and humbles me that people have listened for so long. And now we meet people where their kids are, teenagers, and they're listening to it. and they know the words too, you know, and it's to have that kind of legacy is something that is humbling, and it is kind of important to me personally, just to know that, you know, we might not have sold the most records or whatever, but we've had an impact in some people's lives. And in the last 2 years, you know, I've had a lot of health problems, and just to watch these people step up, like the GoFundMe thing, it was so humbling to see people step up and you know, help me pay these bills and just all of that. I can't thank everybody enough. And this band, you know, has always meant the world to me. It always has. And you know, it's the one thing I have that I can look back in life and say that I'm pretty proud of all of it. So we want to thank everybody, you know, for everything they've done, everything they continue to do. And if you know anybody with our Patreon thing, if you know anybody that you think would like it, spread the word. We're looking for more people.
We will definitely put the link to that, Derri, and your Facebook page and your website, and the link when we post the video. Yeah, and I want to say, please support their Patreon page. You will not be disappointed.
I think you were the one who said something untrue. How the loving thing to do was to set each other free. My mind is kind of fuzzy and it doesn't much matter who. Maybe I said it to you. We set each other free.
Harry, I'd like to, before we do close out, I'd like to ask you and Steve. I'm a big fan of Lost Dogs as well, and I hope you're proud of that band too.
Oh yeah.
You have
Yes,
every reason to be. Old Angel is the last album I have. Is any plans for anything else in that direction, maybe?
Well, we talk about it. I think that we'll end up doing another record. I do think that. Terry's, you know, he's been kind of over the last few years had some health issues too. So that's, you know, everything. Terry drives everything in that band, and I think that when he's ready, we'll end up doing another one. I don't think Old Angel will be our last. I think we'll have another one there.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to say that among all the bands, and I've listened to a lot of them, and fans of many different genres, but you guys to me are a relationship band, whether it's a vertical relationship, horizontal amongst spouses and children. And you guys have made me laugh. You guys have made me cry. To quote one of your songs, you guys have gripped my heart in different ways. And for that, I applaud you. Nobody does that like the choir. And thank you for being, for having your own voice in music, musically speaking and lyrically. And thank you guys for the great music.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for listening.
I'm nobody's garden, no. Honey, please walk me home to the mystical world. Honey, please walk me home. Take my hand, sweet girl. Honey, please walk me home to the mystical world. To the mystical world.
Well, and Mike is a pastor, and we always try to keep the main thing, as Kent says. And so every episode we have a little scripture closeout that Mike does. And then if you guys could just hang loose for a minute after that, we'll close out things.
All right.
Okay, Mike.
Okay, so the scripture I chose to close us with, I actually chose while we were doing the show because just listening to you guys, and I have a confession to make. I'm at a disadvantage with Rex and Kent. I was largely unaware of your guys' music. So I come into this at a big disadvantage, but
We're trying to convert them.
Yeah.
All right.
But But as I sat and listened to you talk and listened to the heart that you seem to have toward the music that you've done, I just felt like I was drawn to do this scripture, which is Micah 6:8, which says, "He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God?"
Thank you, Mike. And thank you, Steve and Derri and Dan, for taking time out of your day here. We just really appreciate it. This has personally been such a great honor and privilege for me. I've been a fan for 36 years. I love you guys. So we're gonna let you guys go, and thanks everyone for watching, and we'll catch everyone later.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is your faith so right? Are you so blessed? Everybody wanders in the forest. Is your heart so true?
God gave rock and roll to you, gave rock and roll to you, put it in the soul of everyone.